Call the meeting to order. Reading of the district's promise statement. We promise to provide a supportive environment where unique learning experiences empower all for their chosen life adventure. Are there any additional items for the agenda?
I did make a few changes to the agenda today under old business. B, I just had safe routes to school, but the city's looking for approval on that, and I'll explain more about the new route when we get to that point. And then down at the bottom, under 9B, 9C, and 9D, I added those, and we can discuss more about that addition of 2 social workers, possibly a math interventionist, and adding an additional school board study session on Monday, June 6th. And like I said, I can talk more about those when we get to that point.
Okay. Any other additional items?
Do we need the donations attached? On the link.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Good
Wendy
catch.
will add those.
Thanks, Tim. All right, anything else? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the donations being added?
I'll make a motion.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Kendra Hain. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Recognition of visitors and open forum. We don't have anybody signed up, so we'll just move to 6, reports and presentations. Well, I guess put it together, student representative report. We don't have any students here. They're all in activities tonight. Student representative recognition then. And you wanted to say a little something about that?
Yeah, so I knew that our students weren't going to be here this evening because they all are being students and have lots of activities going on. I know we were going to recognize them for their work this year as student representatives on the school board and then just their work as leaders in our building. And I just wanted to say that I've been really fortunate to have, dedicated time in my schedule to, one, teach a class, and a PSEO class at that with these kids, and then also just to get to know them and help to develop them as leaders. And if you've been around the building, these are kids that you see everywhere, and they're always trying to do the right thing, include others, and just make this a more meaningful and empowering environment. And that's kind of what they came up with at the beginning of the year, was they wanted to build empowering environments here at JWP. The first semester we took a lot of time working through theory and book studies and doing more of the study of leadership. And then this second semester, they've all, in their various projects, worked to try to build those empowering environments here. So they're making connections between high schoolers and elementary students. They're establishing programs to go beyond them. So our seniors right now know that they're not going to be here next year, but their projects they feel are valuable enough to continue. So they're trying to find ways so that those things will be sustainable and it's not just their project, which is really, really cool to see. And yeah, they're just great kids. I love working with them every day. We have awesome conversations. They've actually been kind of a part of some decision-making process throughout the year as far as what's the student voice part of this, here's how we make decisions, kind of filling them in on some of that background stuff that they'd never heard before. And they continually tell me, let's have more discussions. Let's talk today about this thing or that thing. And they just have such a desire to share their voice and to be a part of the decisions that are being made, and they want to bring other kids in on it too. So we'll have a couple of them back with us next year. 2 of them are graduating. But the 2 juniors will be back in this group, and we're trying to figure out what exactly that looks like. I'm working with Riverland to try to figure out another course perhaps for them to take and receive more college credit. But they're both willing to, even if there's no credit attached to it, being a part of it is kind of like a mentor or a facilitator, on bringing some newer kids up, and then they'd like to see that continue. So that leadership piece that they're building and learning this year, taking that and using it next year with the new group of juniors, and then just continuing to work through in that way. So it's been really good, and they really enjoyed this time. I know they don't say a lot when they're here, but they're actually working on hopefully finding some more structure to what's brought to a board meeting, what's important to share, when they can or can't speak to something that they might be here for, because I think a lot of the time they're intimidated by the conversations, the topics that are brought up, and they don't know what their role is. So we're trying to develop that, Laura, and Katie, you've been pulling some stuff together as well to try to make sure that that's not just kids here coming and saying 2 minutes worth of stuff, but how can they be kind of more involved on the board, but not as board members. So, yeah, I guess I probably talked a lot longer than you expected, but
No.
I'm really proud of these kids, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they're gonna do someday, because it's gonna be pretty awesome.
Well, thank you for taking the time to work with them too, so.
Of course,
that's
yeah.
Awesome that we can provide that for them, so.
Mhm. Did anybody have any questions about this group over the past year, or what to expect in the years ahead?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
No, thank you again. Just so everybody else knows, we will present, something to the kids during the day next Wednesday. So I'll come in and during their class and present them their certificates. So otherwise we would have done it tonight, but we couldn't be here, so. All right, 6C, Superintendent Report.
I have a few things to talk about. A number of years ago, we got rid of valedictorian. We want to bring valedictorian back. So we had some questions about, okay, is this a breach of confidentiality? Because we're saying who is the top student in the class. So I did reach out to our lawyers to find out, okay, let me get their perspective from a lawyer's point of view, and they came back and said, well, it's questionable, but all you would need is parents approving that their child can be recognized for being valedictorian. So I did talk to I mentioned that to Mr. Hanson this morning. He would reach out to that family so we can honor that student. They'll be doing a speech if they choose to for graduation, and there'll be one other student speech at graduation at that time.
2 questions.
Okay.
Why'd we get rid of it in the first place?
My
Because of-
understanding, and this is when I wish Tim Elke was here.
Yeah.
Because he was on the board at that time.
Mhm.
But my understanding is we got rid of it for one, because they felt it was possibly a breach of confidentiality, announcing it, but we announce honor rolls, so to announce honor rolls and list students off, I don't know how this is
Which I
much
think
different.
that was supposed to be not announced too,
So.
was all of, none of the honor rolls, but.
Right, and then the other one was celebrating the whole class, not just one individual.
Okay. I think I might have a couple more now.
Okay.
What happens if a person that would get it, their parents wouldn't release it?
Then we would
Would the
just.
next person get it?
No, right? You just want to have.
We would
one-
just have somebody else speak. But
Well,
we
anybody
wouldn't-
can speak.
Anybody can speak. My guess, well, and Mr. Hanson, you can answer this because you probably know better than I do.
Yeah, so the
But-
past couple years, and the past few years, I think, before I was here, it was, students submit to give a speech in lieu of recognizing a valedictorian. Over the past year, part of this leadership group too, was a part of this discussion, and saying, can we have a valedictorian back? We talked through it. Today, there was a bit of discussion during the school day on how this particular decision was made and if there's a different way to make it, including other stakeholders, maybe other admin in the building and that sort of thing in the future. Regardless, if there's a student that says, no, I don't want to be recognized for valedictorian, we probably just wouldn't have a valedictorian, and we'd just go back to our routine 2 student speakers. We'll continue to have 2 student speakers. One would be the default for the valedictorian, and then the other would be students that submit an application, essentially your Google form, to say, I'd like to give a speech, here's my speech. And then, going through a rubric and some process with staff, say whose speech would we select to represent our students at graduation. And that's what we've done the past few years.
Do other districts do a valedictorian?
It's kind of a mix. We've done a little bit of research on that, and some do and some don't.
Is there a salutatorian then, or no, just valedictorian?
Just a valedictorian.
And what happens if this, let's say the senior class this year doesn't want to acknowledge somebody, but the junior class does next year? Is it year by year, or is it, you know what I'm getting at? Like, if
Yeah,
somebody
that
doesn't-
wasn't necessarily the impetus for making that change this year. It wasn't because this particular group of students wanted it. It was more of, we want to just recognize that student at the top of the class.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying, like, if that person doesn't want to be recognized, but they
Mhm.
still would get the achievement, so then you wouldn't have a valedictorian, but does that then, the following year, did they get to do it? The next class graduating, do they have that option, or is it just,
Yeah.
if somebody doesn't want it, then there's not one?
I think we'd continue with that option, but after today, I think there's more discussion to be
Yeah.
had. It was a decision that was made by myself and Mr. Erler, and throughout some conversation today, I think it was clear that maybe we should involve more voices in trying to make these specific decisions. And that's kind of where it came today. So we'll just kind of see how this goes this year and then move forward. If we want to continue it next year or make any changes moving forward, it's fine. We want to just make sure, at the end of the day, my idea is that we're recognizing that student for their hard work. That's just my opinion there. And then also, if that doesn't jive with our district, philosophy, promise statement, and everything else, that's fine. I don't want to do anything corollary to, what we believe as a district. So we can definitely revisit and make changes if we feel they're necessary.
There's more than one at the same GPA? Is that something where you'd recognize the 2 or 3 or whatever?
Yeah, that's going to be a unique challenge if that's the case next year.
And can they
Because we'll see, yeah.
Can they decline to do the speech if they would just want to be recognized, but?
I would say they probably could,
prefer
yeah.
not?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I did. I did give a speech.
Okay. Yeah, that's supposedly the biggest fear,
Yep.
public speaking.
No,
The
I-
valedictorian?
Yeah, I didn't speak though, but, yeah, I wouldn't say make them if they don't want to.
No, not at all, yeah.
I was not valedictorian in my class. However, one part that comes into Katie's question about, what if you have 2 that have, or 3 or 4 that have the same GPA? Another thing that's being discussed is weighted GPAs. So, and is my GPA higher because I was taking a college level class in comparison to the GPAs here at JWP? So that's something else we're starting to discuss also. Great questions, thanks everyone. Any other questions about that? Some other stuff. Driver's ed car, I know we've talked about it briefly here and there. We're supposed to get new every 10 years. The state has made a few changes to that. They've pushed it out a little bit to 12 years. However, I've done some work on it this year. There's money in a budget for this vehicle. I've contacted a couple different dealerships. One came back with a bid of $34,900 for a 2022 Ford Edge SE. So it's a crossover vehicle, and it doesn't have all of the features. It's just very basic for us. They would order it for us. We can pick out the colors. That's the freight or the fleet price. So the manufacturer's retail price is 38,000, and we would get it for essentially 35,000. We get to pick the color. When talking with the driver's ed instructors, they did not want red or white. So I was on their website today, and looked and thought that blue would be fitting for us.
Yeah, that's what I would figure.
Perfect.
And I think it's,
Or gray.
as we're driving around, I think how that blue really jumps out when you're driving, so it's easy to see. So that's something we'll do some more work on. If we order it now, we would have it mid to late July. So, and I did email back and forth with the dealership that they will or they'll look at our current driver's ed vehicle for trade-in also. So I need to give them information on that and see what kind of deal they would give us for trade-in for our current driver's ed vehicle.
Does that price include the passenger side brake?
This does not.
Okay.
So that's an add-on that we would need.
And that's the only difference really
That's the
between
only
any?
difference, yep.
Do they do that? Does Ford do that right when they're,
No, it's an add-on, so the dealership would have to put it in for us. And I don't have a price for that add-on brake. The other places I was looking, and they weren't Ford dealers, I looked at a Jeep Trailhawk, and that was around 42,000. So, this seems to be the best money for the vehicle you're getting right at this time. So I'll keep working on that, and let you know where we are with our driver's ed car, but sooner rather than later for that one. Then we had a cabinet meeting today, and one thing that came up, and I'm sure you guys have heard about it too, is that Janesville, Waldorf, and Pemberton are all struggling with daycares, especially infant care. Finding daycares is very difficult to do. A while back, I know there was some possibilities to collaborate with the city about possible locations and different things. So I was going to reach out to the city and see if there's any options or what we could do to help encourage more daycares, because there's 7 in town, not including the school. And I heard within the next couple years, 4 or 5 of them would be closing.
pretty much name your price right now?
Right.
Right, especially for infant care.
Hmm.
So. Construction update, windows are about 50% complete. They look really nice. The middle window, so if you were on the west side or the east side of the school, you'd notice that the middle windows were missing. They're a piece of plywood. Those were supposed to be delivered today, so they'll be starting to put those in also. So those will be completed. By the end of next week, all of the window installation should be done. Lights are done as far as they can be at this time. So the LED lights, the hallways have all been done. The only things they have left are classrooms, or might be a hallway or two where the ceiling's gonna be taken out. So they won't put the new lights in those until the new ceilings go in. If you've noticed, or you could smell outside, they're working on the roof, trying to get ahead of some of the work they need to do this summer. So they're cutting in what they call curbs, which means nothing to me, but curbs for some of the new equipment that's going on the roof. Space for summer here in our building is an issue. So right now, we have 70 kids signed up for SAC. And that's all the space we have right now is for 70. Part of that issue is we're struggling to find workers for summer SAC also. But as of right now, I think Andrea mentioned that we have 10 or so on a waiting list for summer SAC. Then, with all of the work that we've done this year, we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have some instructional concerns, and when I say that, the reason I'm saying that is because we have about 30% of our students that are failing, have a D or an F in one or more classes in the high school setting that we need to get figured out. Behavioral concerns, we've been working on that, meeting twice a week for, gosh, since December. And I feel like we're starting to really make some gains with where we're going with the behavioral concerns and how we can improve behaviors here at school. And then the admin's gonna be attending a 2-day conference in the summer, July 19th and 20th, with Marzano's group, and help guide our direction and what we can do to improve instruction here within this building. And there's follow-up conferences and follow-up training we'll have with staff throughout the school year also. So, any questions for me about my report this week?
Are the behavioral issues at a certain age or just in general? Group or?
There is a group for sure, but it's not just that group. There's a group and then there's other behaviors that are definitely out there. These last 2 weeks will be trying. They always are, so,
Is part of that group on their way out?
no. So we do have some work to do with not only that group, others also. Hopefully, we're headed in the right direction. Katie joins us for as many meetings as she can. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. 6D, Business Manager Report.
All right. I've never done this before, but I had a couple things I thought I should bring to the board's attention, so I created a report here. First thing, obviously the feds have been raising rates now to kind of counteract this inflation. I know one of the discussions we had back when we were issuing the bond for the project or talking about approving the project was just like this was the time to strike with the interest rates they were. So I did ask our financial advisor to kind of just mock up, like, let's say if we did wait that 1 year, what a bond, if we issued it this fall, would look like. So the reason why the principles are different is we actually got a discount on the bond when we sold it that we rolled against the principal. So we still would have received the same deposit with these two issues. It would just would have been less of a discount. Then obviously you can see the interest rate would be higher. So given that, if you add up those interests, the savings there overall, it'd be about $2 million over the 20 years. And then I threw on as well the cost that SiteLogic had estimated if we waited 1 year on materials that they had in all their brochures. So put those together, we're at about 3.8. Obviously, that's probably a grain of salt, but I think it does illustrate that we were good stewards with the public's dollars, and waiting a year would have had some financial consequences. So just wanted to point that out. Couple other things, the fax grant, we actually did receive the check in the mail the other day. It was kind of fun to hold a $250 check.
$250?
Or 250,000. Sometimes I shorten the 1,000 off of that. All right. Yeah. So a lot of zeros on that one. But yes, we did get that deposited, and those are closing out. Retainage hasn't been released yet to the contractors, but that's all that's left. So I know there's a couple. There always are those little punch list items that they'll clean up, and then eventually we'll have to pay that out. But it's good to know that's taken care of. Food service, we were required to do an RFP because it had been 5 years. So the state does have a database of kind of vendors that kind of solicit, like, hey, we want to be included in these RFPs. And I kind of narrowed it down. Some we're too small for some of them based on kind of what their wish lists were, and then others geographically. But I was able to come up with 5. I sent those off. I haven't heard a lot back yet, unfortunately. I think once again, just due to the size. The due date on that is the 14th, so if we do get them back, we'll have time hopefully to recap it before the 20th and make a decision. The other thing that has been talked about is, if we need to, if Taher is really not getting the job done, then maybe going back in-house. And I did try to poke around a little bit with other business managers if anyone's ever gone that way from the management company back to in-house. Once again, didn't get a lot of responses, but I'll probably end up calling the state on that one just to see what that would entail. But yeah, definitely some work to do on kind of food service right now. So, but we're keeping it going. And then lastly, a couple weeks ago, me and Wendy went to the annual conference for MASBO, which is the school business officials. It was over in Rochester. So a lot of good sessions where we kind of just got in a room and brainstormed about ESSER funding. And actually, it was pretty cool because one of them, we were talking about ESSER 3 and that more restricted little pot of money, the 20%. And I had mentioned how we were going to expense the shot clocks or our new scoreboards through that. And then that lit up a lot of eyes in that room. No, people hadn't come to that conclusion yet. So a lot of people were emailing me asking for the construction request we sent in and all that. So that felt good. That was even some of the metro schools were looking to get off of ours. So, but yeah, that's my report.
Nice, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
Thanks.
All right, 6E, QComp report.
QComp report is a report that I have to give prior to June 15th. However, with the way the school year falls and when our next school board meeting is, there isn't a date or a time in there. So that would be part of something I would want to do, or a report I would want to give on June 6th if we do approve adding a study session in June. We would still not have a study session in July, August, or September. However, I do think with the timing of when the end of the school year is wrapping up, I think it could be beneficial for us to have a study session the beginning of June. So we can discuss that more further down the agenda.
Any questions on that? All right, we'll go to 6F, enrollment update and historical cash balances. Any questions there?
Enrollment is, actually has increased by a student or two, yeah, it's went up by 2 students pre-K through 12 since last month. And I think, if I heard correctly, we may have a new kindergartner starting this week.
Oh, wow.
So, a family just moved to town, wanted to get started, so Mr. Adams was working on that. Whether they agreed to start that kindergartner for the last 9 days of school, I didn't get an answer from Mr. Adams. However, we'll see. Moving on. So,
Okay.
enrollment's at 176 and we project, or 676, and we project at 650, so that looks good on our part.
Any questions there?
Historical cash balance. Matt, do you have anything to say with that?
No, I guess I mentioned a couple of meetings ago about how we, mentioned a couple of meetings ago about how we had a few things to claim, especially the facts. So as you can see, our balance has kind of grown back up again, which is good to see.
Any questions there? All right. Buildings and Grounds Committee report. I was thinking we talked about that.
We
at
did
our
talk
last
about
meeting.
this at our study session, but I did want to get it on to the full board meeting.
Oh, okay.
We talked about a number of things, construction. We talked about opening up the visitors' locker room and expanding the weight room to use that space throughout the school day rather than just having some open space in there. So We did talk about quite a few things, however, that was the main thing that we talked about that evening.
Any questions there? All right, 6H, Activities Committee Report.
Our Activities Committee met after our we met last Monday, due to some absences and coaches not being able to attend. So we did have a large number of people, committee members show up for that last Monday, which was wonderful. Got some input on creating our value statement, and just starting the process of how we're going to be looking at all activities, not specific to sports or, I guess sports is the main one, but we're looking at the fine arts, sports, and any community-wide activities all as one, so we can continue to encourage participation at the high school level. So our next meeting, we decided to add a meeting in July, so we can continue this activities committee work.
Any questions there? All right, 7, approval of the consent agenda. As always, we can pull anything out that you so wish. Are there anybody want to do that? I should ask that first.
I have a question though.
Yep, go ahead.
Wasn't Jeff's social studies replacement on this?
It was.
It was on there. It was removed because that particular staff has a military background. So he asked if we've done anything or if we have anything where he would get years of service for military work. So we're looking into that. Wendy sent out a listserv for all of the school districts in Minnesota. We got some responses that some will give some years of recognition for that. Some do a 2-to-1. So if they served for 4 years, they'd get 2 years advancement in their. But at this point, we haven't made a final decision.
It would depend on what the experience was too.
Right.
It wasn't just straight military. It was related to what they'll be teaching or a classroom experience kind of thing.
Oh, okay. That makes sense then.
Do we have any current staff that's in Sismo that has a military pass that could have qualified?
Good question.
The only one that I'm aware of would be Jeff Adams.
That's what I was thinking.
Is your new choir teacher? Don't they have a military?
New choir teacher does too.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I know she's
Good
right, because I
question.
asked him. So, good, thank you for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
We have more work to do with that.
Yep, good point.
Sorry.
No,
No,
that's
that's fine.
that's a very good point. I didn't know that was such a thing, so that's good to know. Any other clarifying questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as is?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And that's Kendra Hain. Any further discussion? Well, I guess we can't discuss anymore. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Old business. Approval of school resource officer contract. You want to talk about that at all? or we can
Yeah,
just go right into it?
this has been something we've been discussing since February. We rewrote the job, or the school resource officer job description. I've looked at it. Officer Johnson's looked at it 2 or 3 times. I sent it to Chief Allman. He's reviewed it, looked at it. Jeff Adams, the elementary principal, Grant Hansen, the high school principal, both looked at it, gave input on that. Katie gave input on that, so, which was great. Everybody seemed to come to an agreement. that they thought it looked good, and we made the appropriate changes. So, any questions about the job description or that position as a whole? I can tell you that having a school resource officer here when we had some stuff happen last week was a huge blessing or positive for us. We let him take the lead on it, advised us, gave us the information we needed to make sure the students were safe, the staff was safe, and how things were handled was wonderful. Kept me informed when, if there was a threat, the threat was taken care of, and we could go back to work like normal.
I know this might be minimal, but the description of his uniform in the contract is different than the job description. The contract says that he has to wear the Janesville Police Department duty uniform and carry their duty weapon. They can have a soft uniform, however, it must ensure that it's readily identifiable, and they must have a full duty gear belt. Where the job description just says a regular police patrol uniform or casual attire as long as the badge is visible. So how strict are you gonna be with the contract of him wearing the duty belt the whole time?
What I can do is within the job description, I would put the duty belt.
Okay.
Because that's a lot more big and bulky for people to see than his badge.
Mhm.
So can make that change. That's not an issue at all.
Are there ever any on-duty status hours that he works outside of those?
Like if we request it,
Yeah, do we have to, is that overtime and everything like that?
it doesn't have to be, he can flex time if we require him to be here at night or on an off time. If we want him here all day plus additional at night, then it's overtime.
Like if we have a football game or something like that, is there ever anybody there? Or do they just swing in?
They just, the duty.
On-duty cop?
The on-duty cop just swings in if we need something or something comes up.
And if something comes up, then and it's not within, it's not the regular school resource officer, it's one of the other, then are we responsible to pay?
No. Chances are they're gonna deal with what they need to deal with immediately, and then they'll hand it off to the school resource officer on Monday morning to deal with.
If it's our issue. if
Our
it's
issue,
Just
yep.
general community or the other team.
Yep.
Any other questions before we go to a motion?
I don't remember seeing that we would pay the overtime, that we would just stick at the 70% in the contract. Did I miss it?
I thought I saw something. Chief of police may approve overtime in advance, but that's it. I see it in the description.
Yeah, it just talks about us paying the 70%. It doesn't say anything if we were gonna pay the time and a half if we required them to be.
I can say we've never been billed any additional time it's always been the flat invoicing.
Would it make sense to remove that then from the job description?
Yep.
Good catches. So are we able, we're approving the position?
We're approving the position, yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
So with the job description, I would be adding the duty belt to the dress and removing overtime, that the school would pay the overtime.
Right.
Okay. I will take care of that in
Okay.
the description.
Any other questions then? If not, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the position of resource officer.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Kendra, right? Kendra Hain. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Ready to move on to 8B?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Another topic that's come up a number of times is safe routes to school. So originally, the route was going to go past the baseball field. They were gonna put a new culvert in, so it'd go across the culvert, behind all the houses on Allen Circle, out to the Northwoods addition. Then they took off the trail that was gonna be on the east side of Allen Circle, and they went to Teal Street. So then I started asking more questions about what, if this is safe routes to school, why aren't we keeping it on school property if we can? So I met with, or Mike Dashner and I met with Jason Femerel, who's the city engineer, and Clinton Rogers, the city administrator, last Tuesday. Whatever day was really rainy, we met. Met out there, we walked, gave our suggestions and to the city of, if we move this fence back 6 feet, run it just past the long jump and the approach to the pole vaulting, and then jogged over another 8 feet to the south and straight like it is currently, they could run to the south side of the creek. It would make the path shorter by about 80 feet. And they'd still have to cross the river, and it'd be more in a line of what they want to do. So I said I would present it to the board, as long as they didn't have to redo the culvert. And the money that they're saving by not redoing the culvert, they would pay to have that fence moved so it's appropriate and our facilities is still fenced in. They said, yes, we can do that. So it would be on all school property. So it would be the school district giving easement to the city to run it on school property. With that being said, remember that they maintain it, they plow it for, to keep the path open.
And you said we currently have a fence back there, right?
There's a fence that runs to the north side of the track shed.
Okay.
That would be.
So that cover the whole football field and track.
Yes,
are
so it would
fenced
all
in.
still be fenced in.
Yeah, okay.
Does everybody know where I'm talking about, or would you like me to pull up a map?
For the most part. So we're approving the new safe route?
We're-
Yes.
You might wanna pull that up.
We're
Just-
approving, giving the
That, giving
property to.
The easement?
Yeah.
The easement.
So who's responsible for any, like you say, maintenance, plowing and everything, but what if, like, damages to it?
The city
The
is.
city is completely responsible for that.
What if somebody gets injured on that
It's on
trail?
the city's insurance.
That's not the updated one. though,
This
do
is
we?
not the updated one. I will show you what the updated one will look like. So, there's a fence. This is school property. There's a fence that runs right here. And this is wide open right now. So what we're proposing is the fence would run this way, and this pond would still be open, but then they would run a path more straight. It'd be just a little bit of a jog, run out here and connect with this.
Did we get clarity yet as to what they're doing at, down by West Falls and Park Road?
I asked about that, and they said they're putting a bridge in over that creek that's there and running that to connect with the current path that's there.
Goes back.
So. The current path runs,
We're gonna have to cut that guardrail.
yeah, there is a guardrail right here. That runs along here. So, this is Teal Street. This will be new sidewalk. A bridge across this culvert right here, and it would connect up with the trail that's here currently.
Any
Our
other-
financial obligation to this project is $45,000. And that's from 2018, that we approved $45,000 for this project.
Can you use ESSER funds? Did we ask that question yet?
We didn't,
Since
but-
part of it's on school property?
It could I mean, I think anything is possible. It seems like with the state, it would just be some fun logic, reasoning, like why is it COVID related or, but, you know, as long as you go with like a student safety or keeps them off the bus, I don't know, something. So,
We use a shot clock.
well, we said it was for activities, cause that was for
Outside of the
getting
school day.
kids and they wanted kids re-involved any way possible with school. They just want to get kids reconnected. So that one we argued basically that, you know, yes, it's going to be mainly basketball, but the new scoreboards could be modified because they're digital for any activity really. So we just said, you know, volleyball, wrestling, you know, knowledge bowl possibly, some of those. So.
Any other questions? So if we approve the safe, do we have to specifically say the easement, or is this?
Just the new route.
Okay.
Because the easement's gonna require special paperwork, right?
Yeah, they'll send us that paperwork. Because the city will have to go back and approve it again. Because it's another change.
So-
It was nice to have the city engineer out here and walk through it with us. And he said, this only makes sense to do it this way. Okay.
So is our commitment the full amount, even though they've saved a bunch of money on changing all of this? Is,
Yeah, our commitment's $45,000 because the project quote back in 2018 was like a $200,000 project, and now it's around a $400,000 project. So back in November, I think it was, we talked about how much, if we were willing to give more money than our
Right.
original 45,000, and we said no, we'll give our 45,000.
right, I just didn't know now that they've cut out a whole bunch, if
No, the project's
that's
still gonna be
over than what they
over budget.
expected. Okay.
Yep.
All right. All right. Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the new route.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Ken Rahane. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. 8C, Superintendent Evaluation. So if you open up the evaluation, there is the list of goals, and then the mid-year review that,
I don't,
what?
nothing.
That Jeremy gave, and then the mid-year review that we gave. He will work on doing the end of year for himself, and then once he's done with that, then we can complete our end of year update. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a link to, there's two links. One is to the JWP strategic plan, and then the other one is the superintendent evaluation procedure, and they've got different things in there for goals that you can try and set. Once Jeremy's done with his evaluation, we will do ours. We'll go into a closed meeting, do the overall evaluation with him, and then we need to start thinking of new goals for the next year. And looking at the strategic plan and the procedure should help us in determining what those new goals might be. And we're gonna try and shoot for possibly the June 6th meeting if we
If that meeting is approved,
we can,
try and do it then.
okay.
That he'll have his done, or we'll have it all done?
That we'll all be ready to have the meeting. But
Evaluation.
we should all be there, so I don't know if anybody is off on June 6th. That won't be here, so we'll have to make sure that we're all available for that meeting. Do you think that's enough time, or do you think we need more time? Just
Him, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's, we talked about
I
it,
can
yep,
have mine,
yep.
I'll do my best to have mine done by the end of this week. That gives the school board 2 weeks to get their part done.
Yeah, and obviously, if you need more time, then we'll adjust as needed.
Right.
Because originally, we had talked about having it done for this meeting, but things happen, so. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, so then 8D, second readings of new policies and existing policies with substantial changes. Any questions on any of these that anybody has?
At our last meeting, we talked about policy 614, where the MSBA wanted to get rid of the form, the assurance of testing security and non-disclosure. They wanted to get rid of the form on the policy and just have a link there. So last week or the week before, Terry Morrow from MSBA sent out saying they did get that updated. So I did go in and update policy 614. And then 614, the assurance of test security and non-disclosure form, that will actually get deleted, so we don't need that any longer.
Any other questions? Okay. 9, new business. Approve summer hours of Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the district office.
Some clarity with this. We've had these hours for a number of years, where you can work 4 days a week if you choose to, work 4 tens. I know last year Wendy chose to work 5 days a week. I did tell her if the board approves this, she still has that option to work 5 days a week. That's totally up to her. This is just another option for those that like to have their Fridays off. So, and then we send an email out to families letting them know that these are the hours people are in the office during the summer.
Is there like a hotline to call if something would come up that would need immediate attention, or is it just?
They could call the school phones, and if they click my number, it rings right to my school cell phone. So, everybody else knows my personal cell phone too, so. Or they can get a hold of somebody that can get a hold of me.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve summer hours.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll give
Go
this
ahead,
one to Sherry. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. 9B, approve the addition of 2 social workers, one in the elementary school and one in the high school, ESSER dollars for mental health needs.
There's definitely the need for some social workers within the building. In the elementary, right now, we have a family services coordinator who has resigned, so we'll refill that position, and that's through South Central Human Relations Center
Yeah.
out of Owatonna, so we'll fill that one. They're redoing the job descriptions right now for those employees, so that will be good for us to see, because I think she has a lot on her plate right now, and I'm interested to see how much stuff has been added to her plate over the years, but there is definitely a need for the social workers to help out in elementary and high school. Mr. Hanson, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think practically anyone on the high school side would support this. From teachers to students, I've heard many students saying that they would appreciate more mental health support in our building and just support in general. Having one counselor that's trying to do both the role of the counseling and, pseudo-therapist and whatever, along with career coordinating and everything else, is a lot on that person's plate for 350 students, and especially post-pandemic when so many of our kids are struggling in so many ways. So students want it, teachers want it, adults and parents and community members all see the need. I think it's time to get something on board.
There's also work in the legislature right now. They announced today that they've created framework to balance the budget. They also mentioned that at this time, they have at least $1 billion set aside for education. Now it will be up to the committees to decide how they're gonna distribute that $1 billion, or if they're gonna associate something with it, such as mental health needs.
If by chance some of those dollars don't come, once ESSER stops, are these positions eliminated, or
That
is
was
that?
my question, yeah.
I think that's when
long-term?
we have to take a real deep, dark look at what we need, what the need is at that point. So 2 years after the pandemic, are we gonna be at the point where we're able to eliminate one of the two or both positions? I do think it's something we need to look at.
So are these a one-year contract right now? Is that how?
Right now, I would say we would write them as a one-year contract to look at what, and look at the needs at the end of next year to see what future needs are. Or see where funding is coming from at that point also.
Okay.
And they'd fall in the same category as the counselor, the nurse, those at that area.
Well, the counselor is under the teacher's contract.
Oh.
If the nurse is a licensed school nurse, she would fall under the teacher's contracts also. However, our current nurse is an RN, not a licensed school nurse, so she doesn't fall under the contract. To be a school social worker, you have to be licensed by the Department of Education. So they would fall under a school or a teacher contract or something very similar to that. These are new positions to me, so I'm working on figuring them all out.
So with those, is JWP rating those job descriptions and stuff?
Yes, JWP
Okay, so we'll
would be-
still have the one social worker that has a job description is being paid by someone else.
Well, we pay a portion,
A
we
portion.
pay some of her salary through a fund.
Okay. And then we'll have the additional two.
Yes.
Do we think these will be easy to fill?
I do think they'll be easy to fill, and the reason I think that is because I've worked with our school psychologist and talked to her, and a lot of times these are college students working on their doctorate, so they would be doing this work along with their doctorate at the same time.
Does MSU have a good social worker program?
Yep, our school psychologist works for MSU as an adjunct professor.
What's the dollar implications for these, do we know?
We don't know at this point. She was getting me that information. I have not received it yet.
So
She's in our building again tomorrow, so I would have more information after tomorrow, I'm sure.
So do we know we'll have enough ESSER dollars to cover?
Right now, we have $360,000 in ESSER.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Do we want to wait to approve to know the numbers before we approve the
We
rules?
can.
or
We can table
Just
it
a
until our next meeting.
Thought. Because in my mind, if you, whatever we have, 300 and whatever it was, you take these two roles plus this next one that you're asking for, that could eat up a lot of it.
Yeah, the other reason it would be good to wait on this is because once the legislature is done, they may designate some dollars specifically for this too. So we can, according to Lori, the school psych, we would be, if we could wait till mid-June if we have to. So we could put it on our next agenda to approve it.
The study session or the 20th?
either one.
Because I would think you'd also want to try and get out there sooner rather than later to find the candidates too.
Right. Is that the way you
So-
understood it, Grant, is we'd be good June when we talked about these?
I think so, but I'm kind of one to say I think we need to get this figured out sooner rather than later to make sure that we have quality candidates
Right,
available.
Right,
Mhm.
beat everybody else to it.
But
yeah.
that's not my decision to make, so.
So would it be okay with the math interventionist to wait on that until we get, or do you know dollars on that
I know
one?
dollars on that one.
Okay.
Do we
And there's
have a-
not like a rough estimate on the dollars of the social worker? But I do agree that I think it's important to fill them.
Do we ever post positions to get candidate flow before we make a final decision?
No, but we can.
Maybe you go that route once the job descriptions are finalized, and then we've got the study session, if that's approved, to make the decision.
Because that's what, 2 weeks?
Right. So I just want to make sure that we probably do it at least at our study session, so we don't wait any longer if we can help it.
1, 2,
Assuming we're gonna have a
This
study
week,
session.
next week.
Keep talking like
be
we are.
3 weeks.
But like Tim was saying, then you could post it out there, we just wouldn't approve until the meeting.
Yep.
So you say that there's 300,000 for ESSER funds, does that not include, did you already take out what's for the scoreboard? So that's the
Yes.
remaining, okay.
Yep, we originally got 800 and some thousand, and 20% of that has to be used for 166, so outside of school time, and that's the portion that the scoreboard came out of. However, I can pull up. So at this point, this is, So we were
Two
given-
buckets, that's why
Yeah.
it's separated here. So this is our more free-to-use dollars allocation. You can see up top there where his cursor is, we had 782 to start with. 625 here is what we have as our freer dollars, if you will. And some of these are things we've either done, as you can see in status there, either they've been already completed and paid for, or they're going on. Obviously, the big ticket item there is the windows we were paying out of ESSER 3. So that will eat up a good chunk of it here. But even with that, we still have 320,000 left of that bucket. And then this one is where the scoreboards are coming out of. But also, this one's the get the kids involved in school any way you can after school, actually. So we are looking for some more ideas for that bucket as well, but that's another 97,000 we have remaining.
So if the state does approve money for mental health, if we approve it today with the ESSER dollars, could that change then and switch it from the money from the state, or does it have to be how we phrase it?
No, I would just come back to the board and we could do a second vote to switch it from the ESSER to the state allotted money, if they do that.
Right, yeah, it doesn't get finalized till the audit wraps up, because if you code it to one of these programs and the audit ends, that's where it is. So until then, we can move it around however we see best.
And if we approve it today, can we approve a job description at the next board meeting, or how does that work?
Well, we don't have to approve a job description, we just have to
Okay.
have one prior to it being posted. So I can go search for job descriptions for school social workers. And I'm sure we can send out to our listserv and get them. And people are pretty quick to respond for those.
And worst case scenario, if it does exceed the ESSER dollars, since there is such a great need for these positions, would approving it now be more beneficial, or just to have that ball rolling? I don't know, I just don't know if we would decide not to get these positions based on how much they cost.
So
What do
your
you think?
concern is you don't want the dollar to affect
Whether or not we need the
whether
positions.
we need the position.
Because regardless of what it costs the district, these are pretty important positions that we need to.
Yeah.
Do you know like comparable districts? Do they have like the or calculator of what everybody else has left? Is that public information, ESSER funds, or is it just kind of on your own?
I don't think that's public. I mean, I could tell you what everybody got, but I don't know where they're at on spending it. You have until September of 2024 to spend these funds, so I know some districts have, kind of wait and see, or have been more planning on what to do, where like, obviously with the windows, we kind of had that allocated
Yeah.
right from the start, so.
One, at Masbo, one thing Matt did was, he came back and talked about some school districts were using their, FIN number 161, so the 20%, they were using that just to pay their coaching salaries and keeping their other money in their general fund as a way to use up those dollars.
Right. Yeah, there, normally with federal dollars, there's these supplant rules where basically like if you are gonna spend it, well, you can't use the grant on it, but none of the COVID buckets have any of those. So there's a lot of that where you can kind of rob Peter to pay Paul and then basically free up the money for whatever you want. So I know we talked about that. One idea was either waiving athletic fees, or one district even talked about, they just started a program where they just said they're going to leave it blank. Whatever you want to pay for a sport, that's what you pay. If you want to pay the full price, go ahead. If you want to pay nothing, and then they just, would backfill with any of these COVID dollars kind of to make sure the sports, were whole. So, and I know we talked about you could possibly waive all fees, but I know that brings in some other challenges with, maybe getting some kids there that don't want to be there or not for the right reasons, but yeah, a lot of ideas there. And like I said, I think the state's whole message was just let's get as many kids reconnected in as many ways as we can, so.
I do think these positions are extremely important. So throughout the discussion, what I can do is work on getting that job description and positions posted and more information on salary and whatnot. And that will at least give us an idea of what interest is out there on how, and if and how we should move forward. So we could, if we have that June 6th study session, we could approve it, the positions there.
When's the legislation?
Sunday,
Yeah,
this Sunday.
and they already, well, they probably said it before too, but they said they're not doing any specials, so if it's not decided this week, it's just gonna wait.
When we normally post positions, do we post dollar amounts?
It's always, a lot of times it's to be determined or according to the master contract.
Okay, so that won't be
Anything out of the ordinary,
Okay.
no.
I mean, if Jeremy's right and they would go on the teacher contract, you're probably looking, total cost probably around 60, 65 if they're right on the base salary. If they're going on the teacher contract at step 0 or whatever,
Right.
that's probably with benefits, it's probably about a 60, 65 cost there.
Would they have you said we'd probably get a doctorate, so they'd probably have a master's degree.
Oh, I thought he was talking about a student, but yeah, I guess they would have an advanced degree at that point.
Yeah, so another 4,000.
Right.
Or so on top of that. So that's 65 to 70,000.
Times 2.
So
Times
140
2.
plus, can you talk yet about just what the math, like what that number is? Or do we have
Math
to
would
wait
be
to get it?
around that same number. That's
So you're looking about 200K.
for 3, yes. The math, what I would say about the math, and Grant chime in whenever, is there's some issues with math right now in the instructional strategies that are being used. These two things have to work hand in hand together. If we don't change the instructional strategies, we're gonna continue to have this issue. So the goal is that we're changing the instructional strategies with the teachers, and this new teacher is coming in and getting the ones that were missed or the ones that were struggling caught up to where they should be. Does that make sense?
You're saying they're working with the staff and students?
Yes.
To get them where we should be at?
Yes.
Okay.
So what type of person is this? Is it
And
a
what-
math teacher? Is it somebody that's more of a, I've never heard this title before.
A math interventionist?
Yeah.
It's just somebody that comes in and works with students on where their specific downfalls are, or their specific needs.
And we have this position up through sixth grade, correct?
Yes. we
So
do
this
have-
would be 7th on up?
This would be mainly 7th and 8th grade?
7th, 8th, probably 9th, lower grade levels in the high school. But it's not too far off or different from what's happening in the title room in the elementary. It's just that we don't have and have not had any positions that support our students like those title positions in the elementary. So students are identified as in need of specific services, reading, math, or otherwise, in elementary, and they've got positions there to help those students specifically. We're noticing, 7th, 8th, 9th grade specifically, there are students that have these needs, and we don't have the positions there to help support these students, and then support the teachers in, either pulling these students out, giving them, individual instruction, or maybe co-teaching or things like that in the classroom. And so we want to put that position there in order to kind of help fill that gap and give our students what they need before they get to 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and they're so far behind and have these huge gaps in not necessarily instruction, but at least in the standards. They've got these huge gaps that we're seeing, and that turns into failing grades. And then when you're at high school, the failing grade turns into, I've got a credit to recover, and it just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And we can't continue to do this. We need to do something different. And having an additional person in this department to support that is what's needed right now. And if that's same kind of thing where we hire this position for a year, and we've got this specific allotment set aside for this, and we reevaluate and we say, you know what, maybe it is a different approach that needs to be done, we don't need this position, or yes, this position has been invaluable, we need to consider pursuing it again. That's something that we can look at down the road, but we really need this person now. We needed them about a year or so ago. So.
And this person would strictly, mainly work with the students to get them up to par, but not necessarily update curriculum or going forward, what are we gonna do? And
Right.
is that gonna be an additional cost to the school? Are we gonna have to hire people to do that as well?
Well, I'm not sure. I think, this position is one that at first would probably be used to support individual students in meeting their needs, kind of meeting them where they're at. Again, it could be kind of a team teaching thing, so if I have, if this person has some time and a teacher wants them to come in and help team teach a specific lesson or go through a unit together. It could also be that we've got kids right now that need some of that credit recovery or have failed Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Well, we don't want to start putting them in intermediate algebra necessarily if they have no idea what they're doing in intermediate algebra. Do we take something out of our schedule for our other teachers? We can't, to have them necessarily take that additional load unless we're putting them on an overload. And then they don't have preps in order to, it's just a spiraling, snowballing thing there too. And so when you have this other person in there, maybe that could, do a credit recovery type class or, something, a remedial course to make sure that kids are kind of catching back up, getting those fundamentals that have been missed in 7th, 8th, maybe even before. So it's probably going to look different down the road, but we need to have something now to start making some changes and giving our kids what they need, so. I don't know if that answered your question.
we're giving the kids what they need, but what are we doing for the teachers to give them what they need so
Yeah.
that we don't have this happen before?
Right, exactly, and that's
gonna
what,
cost
and that's
extra.
what Jeremy's saying too, is that's not gonna be the end-all, be-all solution. It's not just to hire another person, because there's obviously some other things that are going on that are causing our students to be in this place where we've got 30% of our kids that are failing or at a D in a class. And so, there are definitely more systemic issues at play that we've been addressing. We've been meeting with PLCs over the past few months, say, here's where we're at. Something needs to change. And so, like Jeremy said earlier, going to some PD this summer, high reliability schools training through Marzano. What does quality instruction look like in the classroom? How can we be consistent? What are the expectations for our teachers? What are the expectations for instruction in the classroom? All of those things. Not to say that our kids or our teachers aren't working their butts off, but we have to do better. We can do better. That's not ignored at all. That's also a part of our solutions moving forward.
So it's not hiring another person, but it would probably be more utilizing our curriculum director to help in changing the focus.
Yeah, we've all been in this
Yeah,
conversation.
Claudia and Matt, Claudia and Mike Bearding have been instrumental in all of the research that has been pulled together on what's going on, why is this happening, how can we fix it? And that's going to the high reliability schools as an admin team, and then bringing that back, and then through staff development dollars, bringing in training for our teachers. So that will help us identify where we feel the needs are here. And then we talk to Marzano and say, these are where our needs are, what can you do to help us with training? And that's paid for out of our staff development dollars next year.
That help answer that?
Yep, that does.
Do we have a certain level, ESSER dollars for learning loss? If we get back to where it's comfortable, do we have what that looks like? So then that position can be evaluated if it's needed any longer?
That's a great question. I don't know that we've discussed what, we know having 0 kids failing is not realistic. There's always gonna be some, unfortunately. But what is that number? It's not 30%.
Yeah, agree.
But what is that number? At this time, that has not been discussed. That's a great question.
It kind of is like when we were just talking about the social worker piece too. How do we know when we don't need all of these social workers anymore? Well, right now, we've got a really long waiting list of kids that are trying to get support through the school-linked therapy. They have waiting lists in clinics for providers. There are kids upon kids upon kids, and we know that because that is a list that we have. And so when our list becomes, geez, do we even need this or that? Or is this something that we need to continue as what we do? That's something we're gonna have to determine later. But right now, we've got a list of kids that need mental health support, and we have a list of kids that need academic support. And that's probably, a combination of an additional person on staff and some changes and modifications to instruction and what we're doing in our classroom.
Are there any other subjects in the high school that we're seeing?
Yeah, this is across the board.
Yeah, when we say
issue.
30%, we have 30% of our student body that in the 4 core subjects, so reading, math, science, and social studies, that have either F or a D. And if you were to look at a full year's data, you'd see that first quarter, it's not as bad as second quarter. Third quarter is more comparable to first quarter, and then fourth quarter is more comparable to second quarter. So we see that trend of this roller coaster also. So, but it is science, or the 2 subject areas that are, that we're seeing the most need in right now would be math and social studies.
So how are we, how are we gonna do with the social studies then if we do the math interventionist? Are we still
We're still working.
just working on that in-house and,
Mhm.
but right now our biggest need is to get that
Math.
interventionist, okay.
I'd have to do some research, but there's possibility that ADSYS would still, if we're actually hiring interventionists, we have ADSYS for the 2 that we have right now.
In future, we could possibly apply for ADSYS dollars for that. But that grant
Right.
is 2 years now.
Oh, okay. And they have a
Because we
cap,
just-
so if everybody asks for, a ton, then they'll allocate,
Right. But I
or,
do think they took the
Yeah.
cap off ADSYS last time.
oh, just for that year.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay, so are we waiting on the social workers at this time and you're just posting the positions? So we at least get rolling on that?
I'm doing whatever the board tells me to do.
I say let's just do a vote and get it done and get this going.
I mean, it sounds like it won't go over the 300,000
Right.
with what
Sounds
we're-
like we have the funds, that's
Yeah.
from the government, it's not going out of our general funds.
And if it does happen to go over that amount, we can still be brought back to us to move it to somewhere else or.
Correct.
Right.
All right, do we have a motion then?
For which one?
The first one, the B, we're on, right? We've done A, yeah, we're on B.
I'll make a motion to approve 2 social workers.
That's Kendra Hayne, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
That's Katie Cahill, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. All right, 9C, approve the addition of a math interventionist.
I'll make a motion to approve the addition of a math interventionist.
That's Kendra Hayne. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
That's Katie Cahill. Any further discussion on that one? Not. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. 9D. Okay, this is the
Me again?
addition of the study board session, sure.
Okay. There is so much going on at the end of the school year coming up, and so many reports we have to the state. Which, yep, those are things we have to do. But when we don't have a meeting between now and June 20th, it's difficult to say, yes, we've given our reports to the school board when our reports aren't completed yet. So our evaluations of our teachers and the QComp report isn't complete until we've done our final evaluations at the end of the year checkouts for the teachers. So that's the last week of school. Well, I can't give you a report by June 15th if we don't have a meeting till June 20th. So my request would be that we do a study session on June 6th. It'll just be a study session. We'll discuss pertinent information at that time. We don't have to discuss anything extra unless everybody wants to. It would be things like QComp, end of the year evaluations, how that's went. It would be my evaluation if everybody can make it. What else did I have? It might be some budget clarification, because we do have a finance committee meeting after this tonight. If there's some things we need to go back and look at with our budget, it would be some clarification with that also. I just feel like an additional meeting before we approve our budget and we have to get all of our reports sent to the state would be a good idea.
Any questions on that?
How often do we evaluate staff? Admin do the teachers, you do the admin?
Yearly.
Just once a year?
The final one, we do a summative, but we do check-ins throughout they create goals at the beginning of the school year. And then we check in with them throughout this year.
Make sure they're on task.
The teachers, non-tenured teachers get evaluated or get observed by principals 3 times a year for a formal evaluation. Tenured teachers or continuous contract teachers are 1 time a year. All of the teachers also have to do a peer review of some sort. So if they line up a peer of theirs to come in and watch them teach, then they go watch the other teacher teach, and they do some collaborating amongst themselves. Part of the work we're doing with high reliability schools and vector solutions is looking at a more mainstream or easier to use evaluation process. So right now it's a lot of annotated notes and everything that goes along with it, which works. However, in the last 5 to 10 years, they've come out with some really nice evaluation tools for us to use. So those are some things we're looking into also.
Any other questions? All right, I'll just go ahead and make the motion on this one to add the school board study session on Monday, June 6th at 5:30. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Kendra? I'll give that to you. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. 10, approve resolution accepting donation with many thanks. I'll run through them. We have a donation from Complete Construction for $200 for the prom committee. Frechette Incorporated for $250 for the prom committee. Donation from Wasika Glass for $100 to the prom committee. Casey's General Stores, $104.40 for cash for classrooms loyalty donations. Donation from Pearson Livestock Incorporated for $100 to the prom committee. Oliver Farm Drainage, $100 to the prom committee. And American Legion Post 311 Elysian, $5,000 for the sound system. All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion for accepting donations with many thanks.
That's Tim Burke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Kendra Hayne. And I will go to Wendy for the roll call.
Hain,
Yes.
Cahill,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Dashner,
Yes.
Size.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. 11, upcoming meetings. We actually have a finance meeting right after this. And then, so now we'll have the June 6th study session and evaluation if you're able to get it done. And then June 20th, regular board meeting, July 11th.
You have activity?
July 11th.
Or was that the 12th? I was thinking, okay, July 11th, the activity committee meeting, and July 18th, the regular school board meeting.
You do those on off nights from board meetings?
I was thinking it was the 12th for some reason.
No,
then I
I'm just
saw
saying
that
that's-
before.
No, we are that one because some people couldn't make the 18th, or
Oh,
there was something about the July 11th date.
okay.
I can't remember. That was a week ago.
You don't have anybody inquired, do you?
Any other
What's
questions?
on the sound system? Oh, sorry, we're still on.
I
That can wait.
Any other questions before we adjourn? Okay. Otherwise, we are adjourned at 7:03. Thank you, everyone.